I have never in my life seen an alleged criminal make such unbelievably stupid moves. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please do subscribe, and if you're old here, hello again. My name's Philpott and I cover true crime and missing person cases on my channel. This case is one that honestly, the full story isn't even out there yet. This is absolutely a case where things are actively unfolding, but there is a specific reason why I'm covering it now. What's available to us in this case so far, I actually have no words. This is a missing person case. Technically, however, someone has already been charged with murder, despite there being no body. And this person only went missing on the 1st of January 2023. And that is the case of Anna Walshe. Anna Walshe was a 39-year-old mother of 3 from Serbia. She was born in Belgrade, Serbia in 1983, and she grew up there. She had one older sister named Alexandra. In 2005, at the age of 22, Anna emigrated to the US and she eventually went on to become a dual citizen. She started working, creating a life for herself, and sometime between 2005 and 2007, Anna met and married her first husband, Mark Nip, and the two of them moved to New York City. Anna was very ambitious and was absolutely not afraid of putting in the hard work. She was just very willing to climb the ladder right from the bottom up. She started working in hospitality. She did that for a few years, gradually working her way up through multiple different jobs in different locations, and eventually she became the regional general manager at a real estate company called Tishman Speyer. But previously, while she was still working in a hotel in Massachusetts, she met a man called Brian Walshe. When she met Brian, she was actually still married to Mark, but something in Anna knew that Brian was the one. But of course, they did hold off on dating or anything like that until Anna and Mark were divorced. And that was in 2014. By December of 2015, Anna and Brian were married. So it was a fairly quick turnaround, but Anna was the kind of person who was, not available for wasting time, as we can see throughout her career. And the new couple settled in Cohasset, Massachusetts, which is around a 45-minute drive from Boston, I believe. And by 2016, they had their first child together, followed by 2 more, one in 2019 and another in 2020. And their kids were all boys. They were aged 2, 4, and 6 at the time of Anna's disappearance. Anna was described as a very loving and devoted and involved mother, and she would literally do anything for those boys. But the thing was, Anna worked a lot, and she didn't even work locally. She worked in Washington, D.C. for the real estate company. This meant that during the work week, Anna would be based in Washington, D.C., and she would come home for the weekends and the holidays. And listen, Anna was clearly doing very well for herself. She had a great job. She was beyond the point of just living paycheck to paycheck. This woman was building wealth. In fact, she had almost $2 million worth of real estate properties in her possession, and she had sold about $3 million worth. So she really was creating this well-rounded life for herself, building her career, building a family. She was making it big in the US. Brian, on the other hand, was fairly limited in his lifestyle because he was actually on house arrest, but I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But seemingly all of Anna's success and happiness was brought to a dramatic halt on New Year's Eve 2022, moving into 2023. That night, Anna and Brian had plans with a family friend, and this friend came over for dinner at their house on New Year's Eve. This friend's name was Jem Mutlu, and I believe he was a former boss of Anna's. He says that night they hugged, they celebrated, just like everyone does on New Year's, and they were absolutely looking forward to a fresh start to the new year. And he said that there was absolutely no indication of anything other than celebrating the new year. Like, problems didn't exist that night. But right after midnight, Anna attempted to call her mother, but she never picked up. She also tried to call her sister Alexandra, but she missed the call because she was asleep. And then she also tried to call a close friend who had also been her maid of honor at their wedding. And she didn't hear the phone ringing because she was at a New Year's party and, loud music and all that. Knowing that that was the last few hours, most likely, of Anna's life, it just hits a little different. So according to Brian, Anna went to bed around 1 a.m. Jem apparently left the Walsh home at about 1:30 a.m. and the reason Anna went to bed fairly promptly after the New Year's celebrations was because she had to get up particularly early because she had to fly to DC in the morning. Originally the plan was she wasn't going to be back to work for another few days, but a work emergency came up and she had to go back on the 1st. So on the 1st, she woke up very early, gave Brian a kiss and told him to go back to sleep, and then she got some kind of ride-share service to the airport, like an Uber or a Lyft or something like that. Brian then woke up at 7 a.m. to make breakfast for their kids, and Anna had obviously already left. So let's skip forward a few days, shall we? On the 4th of January, Anna's colleagues in DC had obviously expected her to come into work, but she didn't, which was so out of character for her, especially considering she didn't even call them to let them know ahead of time. This is someone who cared a lot about her career. Why would she just not show up one day? They called the Cohasset police and requested that they run a wellness check on Anna because they were concerned. So they arrive at the Walsh family home to check up on Anna, and Brian says that he hasn't seen her in 3 days, which makes sense. I mean, she left for Washington DC on the morning of the 1st. But then how did she never even show up to work even by January the 4th? On this day, Cohasset police also noticed when they arrive at the Walsh family home that in Brian's car, which is a Volvo, the seats in the back were folded down and there's a plastic liner on top of them. The next day when they went back to the house, the liner was gone and the carpet had fresh vacuum streaks. And when Brian was asked about this plastic liner, he just said he had thrown it away. But in this time, Brian was being very cooperative with police. He was giving them as much information as he could, only it didn't last long for pretty much all of this information to be disproven. So let's get into the timeline of that first week and a half or so of January. Starting with Anna's rideshare on New Year's Day to the airport. There actually was no record of any rideshare going to that address that morning. And her apparent flight to DC, well, she wasn't booked onto that flight or any flight that day. So they start looking closer at Brian's movements on the 1st of January. That afternoon when the babysitter was in the house, Brian says he went to pick up some groceries around 3 p.m. He brought the groceries home and then went straight back out to visit his mother. Now his mother lived in Swampscott, about 55 minutes of a drive away, but it took him 30 minutes longer than normal this day. His reason for this is that he lost his phone that morning, so when he went to visit his mother, he got lost. To go visit his mother, guys. After this, he goes to Whole Foods and CVS and eventually returned home. But actually, there were no receipts to confirm him being in Whole Foods or CVS, and there were strategically placed CCTV cameras facing the front doors of both of these places, and neither show Brian Walsh in there at any point on that day. Something is very sketchy here. And of course, later he gets back and finds his phone behind a couch cushion, so, you know, nice and convenient. I don't want to sway you, but just sometimes... Also, it's important to note, Anna's phone pinged in the area near the Walsh family home on the 1st of January, and there was no debit or credit card activity after this day. But let's get on to the 2nd of January. He told investigators that he brought his oldest son to a juice bar in Norwell, and there is actually CCTV of him there. But that's the only place he says he went. However, based on surveillance videos, he actually went to Home Goods as well that day and bought 3 rugs. And he also went to Home Depot in Rockland wearing a surgical mask and gloves and purchased $450 worth of items. Now that in itself is fine, but let me tell you what these items were. Cleaning supplies, mops, a bucket, tarps, goggles, a hatchet, a hacksaw, and baking soda. This is the day after Anna was last seen, but 2 days before she was reported missing. As for Anna's phone pinging, it did actually ping again near the family home on the 2nd of January. It hadn't moved since the previous day, which obviously does not align with this story of Anna having to fly to DC on the 1st. Alright, on to January the 3rd. Phone data traced Brian's movements on the 3rd to an apartment complex in Abington at 4:27 p.m. And there is CCTV footage of him at this location getting out of his car with a heavy bin bag and throwing it over his shoulder and into the dumpster. About 20 minutes later, he went to another apartment complex in this town and did the exact same thing. And then another 20 minutes later, he went to an apartment complex in Brockton, the next town over, and again threw some items into a dumpster. Unfortunately, there's no way to find these items because the contents of the dumpsters were emptied and taken to incinerators, I believe, later that day. On the 4th of January then, remember this is the day where authorities came to Anna and Brian's home to perform a wellness check, but before that, Brian visited Home Goods and TJ Maxx to buy towels, bath mats and men's clothing, and then Lowe's to buy squeegees and a trash can. Then we go on to the 5th. This is the day where police come back to Anna and Brian's house, and also, according to Brian's phone data then, he went to Swampscott and travelled to his mother's apartment complex and discarded some items in the dumpster there. Now, investigators collected trash bags here and found the following items: a hatchet, a purse and boots worn by Anna Walsh, and Anna's personal COVID vaccination card, used cleaning materials, a rug, and bloodstains. On the 6th then, police launched a huge search for Anna Walsh in the areas around the Walsh home. There were a lot of wooded areas nearby, so they did a lot of searching over around there. But something else that happened that day was actually really strange. A house previously owned by the Walshes went on fire. Obviously, this raised alarm bells at first because it looked pretty suspicious since they had just kicked off this huge search for this missing woman. But it ended up just being a freaky coincidence. And not to mention, they had actually sold that property in 2022, so it didn't belong to the Walshes anymore. But I guess it's just one of those weird things. On the 8th of January then, that was a pretty eventful day. This was the day that investigators obtained a search warrant for the home of Brian and Anna Walsh, and they started searching immediately. They searched inside and outside the house, and they did not come out empty-handed. So during this search, they found blood and a bloody, damaged knife in the basement. What in the ever-living... As far as the day that I'm filming this, the 1st of March, there is no confirmation on whose blood this is, but we shall see. Also on this same day, Brian was arrested. He was charged with misleading a police investigation, and not only is this significant in itself, but as he was being escorted out of his house, Brian is smiling like he's being captured by the paparazzi for his loving fans. It is the weirdest, creepiest thing I've ever seen. On January the 9th, Brian Walsh pleaded not guilty to the charge of misleading the investigation, and the judge set his bail at $500,000 cash. And they also set the next bail hearing for the 9th of February. But on the same day, more evidence was found at a trash facility in Peabody, including a hacksaw, torn up material, bloodstains, and a piece of a necklace known to have been worn by Anna. And some of the items also had traces of baking soda. Then we have a huge twist. On the 17th of January, Brian Walsh is charged with the murder of his wife, Anna Walsh. Now, this is pretty crazy considering they don't even have a body, so technically there's no proof at this point that Anna Walsh is even dead. However, what I've told you so far is not even everything they had on him. They actually had another huge portion of evidence that was scarily incriminating. But before I tell you about that, let's get into why Brian was on house arrest, because this will give you a lot more information about his character. So Brian had this friend called Sam who he bonded with over art, and in particular Andy Warhol paintings. And Sam actually owned a few Warhols because he had bought some in 2016, I believe. And Brian came to Sam with this great big idea to sell the paintings for him and make him a crap ton of money. And Brian apparently already had a few buyers in mind. So it was like, okay, you know what? There is big money in art, so it's not even the craziest thing. So Brian went to his friend's house one day. Side note, this was in South Korea. He took the paintings away to bring them back to the US. But some time had gone by and Sam hadn't gotten an update from Brian in a while. So he texts him. And he calls him. And he emails him. But Brian had absolutely ghosted him. Sam is then trying to get other friends involved to try and contact Brian for him, and eventually they did actually get in touch with him, and Brian said, yeah, you know what, I actually haven't been able to get any buyers, so I'll just return the art to you. So they would set a time to meet up, and Brian wouldn't show. And this would happen over and over again. So it's very clear what he's trying to do here. Bear in mind, to his actual friend. Anyway, eventually they got another friend involved who actually knew where Brian lived, and finally Brian handed over, well, most of the art except 2 of the Warhols. So next thing you know, someone pops up on eBay selling these exact 2 Warhol paintings. Obviously it was Brian, and I don't think Sam was aware of this as it was happening. How could he be? But he basically said in the ad that he overpaid by way too much when he bought these 2 paintings back in 2007. He had paid $240,000 for them. All he wanted was just to get some of his money back. So he was selling them for a total bargain of $80,000. And he did actually have a buyer interested, whose name was Ron Rivlin. Now, Ron Rivlin owns the Revolver Gallery in California, which is the largest Andy Warhol gallery in the world. Pretty legit guy. And when Ron's colleague met with Brian to go through with the transaction, Brian left with a check for $80K, which he cashed almost immediately. It's then the next day when Rivlin discovers, even though these paintings were, pretty convincing, these were definitely fakes because they didn't have the verification stamps on them. And he tried to contact Brian. Emphasis on tried. He tried 16 times. Obviously, Brian was not opening that line of communication. Why would he want to give his $80K back, right? But Rivlin managed to contact Brian's wife, Anna, and eventually Brian emailed him saying that, yes, you know what, this is within the return policy. I think they had a written agreement of like a 3-day return policy if they were unsatisfied with the transaction or whatever. And he said, honestly, I don't want you to suffer financially from this transaction, especially because it wasn't your fault. So it sounds like he's managing pretty well. He's like, okay, you know what, you're right, absolutely. He didn't say sorry, but he was like, okay, let's make this right. And I'm sure what you can guess Brian's next moves were. He ghosted. Eventually, I believe he did send Ron $30K, but he made all kinds of excuses for the rest of the money. Ron ended up getting the FBI involved, and this is what all led to Brian finally getting in trouble and pleading guilty to wire fraud, interstate transportation for a scheme to defraud, and possession of converted goods and unlawful monetary transaction. So he was put on house arrest. He was equipped with an ankle bracelet. But this ankle bracelet didn't even have GPS tracking, which confused me at the start because I was like, isn't that the whole point? Apparently it used radio frequencies to alert police when he left his home, and he was actually allowed to do this provided it was pre-approved. So he could still do the school run and run errands and stuff like that. I mean, that's fair considering his wife during the work weeks was down in Washington, D.C. I'm just going to breeze over this next part here too, but Brian Walshe also stole about $800,000 from his father during a home refinance deal. His father essentially, obviously, wanted nothing to do with him after this, and I love this. In his will, he said, I hereby bequeath to Brian or Walshe my best wishes, but nothing else from my estate. Oh, yes. Brian clearly knew about this because after his father's death, he broke into his house and stole a bunch of stuff and disposed of the will. And he only got caught because it had been on file digitally. Oh, you're not ready for this next bit. Oh my God. The Google searches. This is possibly even more incriminating than all of the details I've shared with you already. I had downloaded a few podcasts to listen to on my flight over to New York about this, right? And every single Google search that I heard, I turned to my boyfriend and I was like, honestly, there is not a single one that's even slightly okay. Let's get into these. The first one is actually the most innocent, but that's on the 27th of December, so Anna was still around. Brian searches, what is the best state to divorce for a man? This is 4 to 5 days before his wife goes missing. Maybe that's a little off. But what I'm about to tell you, these all occurred on the 1st of January. The first day that Anna's whereabouts cannot be accounted for. So keep that in mind. I start at 4:55 a.m. The first one is how long before a body starts to smell. At 4:58 a.m. he searched how to stop a body from decomposing. 5:20 a.m. how to embalm a body. 5:45 a.m. 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. 6:25 a.m. how long does someone have to be missing to inherit? 6:34 a.m. can you throw away body parts? 9:29 a.m. what does formaldehyde do? 9:34 a.m. how long does DNA last? 9:59 a.m. can identification be made on partial remains? 11:34 a.m. dismemberment and the best ways to dispose of a body. 11:44 a.m. how to clean blood from a wooden floor. 11:56 a.m. luminol to detect blood. 1:08 p.m. what happens when you put body parts in ammonia? 1:21 a.m. is it better to throw crime scene clothes away or wash them? I feel like if I searched one of those things, the police would break down my door immediately. Also bear in mind, this is on the same day that later on Brian lied about going to Whole Foods and CVS. Moving on to the 2nd of January. This is the same day Brian bought $450 worth of cleaning supplies and mops and buckets and goggles and all that stuff, okay? 12:45 p.m. hacksaw best tool to dismember. 1:10 p.m. can you be charged with murder without a body? 1:14 p.m. can you identify a body with broken teeth? Moving on to January the 3rd, the day Brian is seen on CCTV disposing of heavy trash bags in multiple dumpsters. 1:02 p.m. what happens to hair on a dead body? 1:13 p.m. what is the rate of decomposition of a body found in a plastic bag compared to on the surface in the woods? 1:20 p.m. can baking soda make a body smell good? This is the guy who is pleading not guilty to Anna Walsh's murder. And to make it even more stupid, he searched these on his son's iPad. It is the strangest thing. It is honestly like he did everything he possibly could to get caught, to look guilty as Was he just that narcissistic that he thought he was so untouchable? Maybe. I don't know. Let's talk about Anna and Brian's relationship for a sec, because when you hear details like this, you just think, how is it even possible for someone to be like this and have this beautiful, loving, and very successful wife? It doesn't add up. Brian was punching. Personally, to me, I just get the feeling that maybe she was afraid to leave and was just really good at keeping up appearances. Because from the outside looking in, they looked like this perfect family. Something to be aware of is that in August of 2014, which is literally the year Brian and Anna had just started dating, Anna filed that Brian threatened to kill her and her friends over the phone. This case ended up being closed because Anna refused to cooperate after this. I don't know about you, but that to me sounds like exactly what would happen if somebody was in an abusive relationship. You try to alert authorities and then your significant other finds out and you're like, oh no, never mind, everything's fine. And I could be wrong about this, like it's just a feeling, but let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on that. Another reason I'm thinking down this route is a few days before Anna went missing, she asked her mother to come visit the next day, basically saying that there were problems. Her mother obviously couldn't just drop everything straight away and go to Anna, but she did say, well, I could come visit on the 5th or 6th of January. And Anna then came back with a change of heart saying, oh, no, it's okay. There's no obligation. We're making plans in February, so it's all good. But she also mentioned that whatever happens, happens. Something about that just feels so disturbing, considering Anna most likely didn't even survive until the 5th or 6th of January. Maybe Anna felt trapped. And yes, maybe she had love for Brian. Maybe there was even an element of codependency or even manipulation there. Ron Rivlin, who Brian screwed over with the Andy Warhol paintings, described Brian as someone who was well capable of high-level manipulation. I mean, that is pretty clear from what we've heard. So how does that show up in a marriage with someone who is this close to him? Something I can't stop thinking about is maybe Anna was just willing to put up with whatever this relationship brought because it meant a secure family home for the kids. In Massachusetts, there's actually still visitation rights, usually, even if somebody has full custody. So by staying together, the children would be more protected. I mean, look at what happened in the Skelton brothers case. If this was an abusive relationship, it's like the frog in hot water analogy, where if you put a frog in cold water and gradually heat up the water until it's boiling, the frog will just stay until it dies. Whereas if you put a frog into water that's already boiling, it will just jump straight out. You can see how that applies in an abusive relationship if that's what was going on here. Obviously, I don't know. Would love to know your thoughts though. So how did Brian become this monster that he so clearly is? Needless to say, he had a pretty rough upbringing. He was emotionally abused, neglected, unloved apparently, not to mention he'd allegedly experienced some trauma too. And I haven't even told you yet, but at one point Brian was diagnosed as a sociopath. And my goodness, the list goes on and on. If you thought his money-related charges were a lot, listen to this. On one occasion, Brian was leaving China and he tried to smuggle several antiquities out of the country, okay? And when he was caught, this lunatic picks up a heavy object and tries to kill the 4 to 5 guards that were coming after him. How did he function in society for so long? Okay, but I want to talk about motive for a sec. If Brian is guilty of what he's being charged with, because I have to say if, innocent until proven guilty and all that, why would he do this? Did he snap that night? Did he feel emasculated by his beautiful and successful life? Or was the motive purely financial? We already know what he's willing to do and who he's willing to f*** over for a payout, based on the Warhol scandal and his father. So pair that with the Google searches about how long someone has to be missing to inherit from them and all that, I mean, that paints a pretty solid picture too. Allegedly, Anna wrote this note to Brian on a champagne box just hours before she disappeared. She said, "Wow, 2022, what a year, and yet we are still here and together. Let's make 2023 the best one yet. We are the authors of our lives. Courage, love, perseverance, compassion, and joy. Love, Anna." Which just shows the fine line between life and death, if she is dead. But I don't think there is anyone out there that believes she is still alive. Okay, so remember that the next hearing for one of the charges was to be on the 9th of February. Well, on that day, Brian's lawyer, Tracy Minor, claimed that they hadn't received the basic discovery materials, and so they set the next status hearing for the 1st of March, which actually is today as I'm filming this. So I looked it up just before I started filming, and a little bit disappointing, but they've actually pushed it back again to the 4th of April. So I'll update when there's an update. But that is everything I've got for you so far on this case. It is actually a little crazy how quickly they jumped to charging him with murder, but this guy did not make himself look great. And you never know, they could also have even more information that we don't know about yet. From what we know so far though, this case is fully based on circumstantial evidence, but damn, he looks bad. Anna and Brian's 3 sons are now in the custody of the state's Children and Families Department, and I just hope to God that they get to go back to some family soon rather than being bounced around the system for the next 12 to 16 years. Let me ask you this. What do you think of this case? What are your main gut feelings about what happened to Anna and how guilty Brian is? I think he couldn't look worse at this point. But thank you so much for watching. It means the world to me that you're here. Make sure you subscribed and you've hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of my uploads. And you can also support the channel by joining the Patreon. It's a very small euro amount per month to help me keep this channel alive and hopefully one day go full time with it and be able to put up way more videos. The details for that are in the description below. Don't forget to follow on TikTok and Instagram as well at kphilpott_yt. Thanks so much again, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.